March 25, 1945, past Schirmerfield, Germany. A pair of Me-262 jet fighters swept over the German countryside, lining up to land through morning fog. Their pilots, flying the fastest operational aircraft of the war, descended toward the airstrip with the confidence of invulnerability. Without warning, 3 dark camouflaged P-47 Thunderbolts screamed down from the high overcast. Their Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engines thundered at full throttle, exhaust flames streaming. Major George Bostwick led the American formation, his airspeed needle surging past 400 then 450 miles per hour. Below, the surprised Luftwaffe pilots opened their throttles, too late. The Thunderbolts held the advantage of altitude and momentum. As the first Me-262 flared for landing, Bostwick's 8.50 caliber guns erupted. Tracers tore into the jet's fuselage. It exploded in flame. His wingman rolled onto the second Messerschmitt. Another burst and it cartwheeled into the earth. In seconds, 2 of Germany's vaunted jets were destroyed. The American P-47s climbed away victorious. The untouchable had been caught and killed. This astonishing feat was made possible by a transformation in the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a transformation driven by one engineer's vision, turning an unlikely design into a fighter that could match and exceed the best the Luftwaffe could field. Part 1. Origins of the Thunderbolt, a Radical Gamble, 1939 to 1941. 1939. Long Island, New York. As war clouds gathered over Europe, the US Army Air Corps sought a fighter capable of challenging the Messerschmitt Bf-109. At Republic Aviation Corporation, a Georgian immigrant named Alexander Kartveli faced that challenge. Kartveli, chief engineer, had worked under aviation pioneer Alexander de Seversky when hired at Seversky Aircraft Corporation in the 1930s. Together they'd experimented with radial engine fighters, but now the bar had been raised. Early reports from Europe showed combat climbing to higher altitudes where engine performance deteriorated. America's adversaries were fielding faster, more heavily armed aircraft. The initial AP-10 concept that led to the XP-47 was a lightweight, approximately 4,900-pound design with an Allison V 1710 V12 and only 250 caliber guns. Kartveli scrapped it. To dominate at altitude, he needed radical thinking. The largest available engine coupled with an advanced turbo supercharger system. He chose the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder air-cooled radial producing 2,000 horsepower. A remote-mounted turbocharger in the rear fuselage, paired with intercoolers, would maintain power even at 30,000 feet. The design grew exponentially. By late 1940, the XP-47B prototype weighed nearly 6 tons, the world's heaviest single-engine fighter. It bristled with 8.50 caliber guns and required a 12-foot propeller. Army Air Corps brass were stunned. Ground crews joked the bulbous fuselage resembled a milk jug, thus was born the nickname Jug. Even Kartveli admitted it seemed too big, but that bulk enabled unprecedented performance. The deep fuselage housed the complex turbocharger ductwork derived from the P-43 Lancer. The wings, thin, semi-elliptical in plan form, promised low drag at high speed. May 6, 1941, test pilot Larry Brabham lifted the XP-47B off Long Island. Kartveli and his team watched anxiously. The prototype reached 412 miles per hour at 25,800 feet and climbed to 15,000 feet in 5 minutes, figures recorded in official test reports. Republic declared it the fastest fighter in the world at high altitude, outclassing even the Spitfire Mark V. But there was a price. The Thunderbolt consumed about 100 gallons of fuel per hour at full power. With 305 gallons internal capacity, combat radius was roughly 165 miles. The Army accepted it as a short-range interceptor. No one yet imagined what combat would demand of Kartveli's gamble. Part 2, Baptism by Fire, Europe, 1942 to 1943, December 1942, England. The first P-47Cs arrived in Britain by late December 1942, with units working up in early 1943. The 56th Fighter Group and others began transitioning to the massive new fighter. Pilots accustomed to nimble P-38s and Spitfires stared incredulously. "It looks like a flying bathtub," one remarked. The P-47 weighed almost twice as much as a Spitfire. Many doubted it could dogfight the agile Bf-109 or lethal FW-190. April 15, 1943. Major Don Blakesley of the 4th Fighter Group scored what was officially credited as the P-47's first air-to-air kill, FW-190 over Nokker, Belgium. Some accounts describe him pulling out of his dive low over Ostend on the return flight, though that dramatic detail appears in post-war retellings rather than original combat reports. The Thunderbolt's 8 guns delivered over 100 rounds per second combined, more firepower than any single-engine fighter in the world. And when a Jug rolled into a dive from altitude, it became nearly uncatchable. German pilots learned to fear that screaming descent. In one early encounter, 2 56th Fighter Group pilots pushed their aircraft into terminal dives, encountering compressibility, transonic shock waves that froze controls. Their instruments read an impossible 725 miles per hour before recovery. Actual speed was closer to 560 miles per hour, and for late 1942 that was extraordinary. At 30,000 feet, the P-47 dominated. Its turbocharger maintained full power where German fighters gasped for air. Thunderbolt pilots learned to engage from above, dive, strike, and climb away before the enemy could react. A 1944 test report noted performance at altitude ranged from fair to good, while low-altitude agility was fair to poor. Luftwaffe ace Heinz Baer warned his pilots the Jug absorbed astonishing punishment. German flyers discovered they could sometimes evade at low level by pulling up sharply. The Thunderbolt's climb rate couldn't match a Bf-109's. The P-47 was too heavy for some manoeuvres, one recalled. We'd see it coming and pull up fast, it couldn't follow. But woe to any German who tried diving away. As Allied pilots joked darkly, "It can't climb worth a darn, but it sure can dive." Even Don Blakesley, who later preferred the P-51, conceded, "It ought to be able to dive, it certainly can't climb." Toughness became the Thunderbolt's signature. First Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group survived a savage encounter with 419s that left his aircraft riddled with 20mm shells and hundreds of bullets. The Jug brought him home, engine sputtering, airframe shredded. Johnson survived to become an ace. By mid-1943, P-47 units escorted B-17 and B-24 bombers into France and the Low Countries, initially only about 165 miles in before fuel forced them back. On August 17, 1943, during the devastating Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid, Thunderbolts tangled fiercely with intercepting German fighters. Bomber crews learned to watch for the chunky silhouettes high above, contrails streaming as the Jugs dove to engage. The P-47 had proven itself in combat, but to escort bombers all the way to Berlin, it needed greater range, better climb, and more speed. At Republic's Farmingdale plant, Kartveli was already working on those problems. Part 3. The Transformation. Engineering Breakthroughs of 1944. 1944, Republic Aviation Plant, Farmingdale. Combat revealed the Thunderbolt's limitations, range, climb rate, and low-altitude performance all needed improvement. Kartveli approached this methodically. The paddle blade propeller arrived with the D-22 and D-23 blocks in early mid-1944. Many earlier airframes were retrofitted in theatre. Hamilton Standard's broad chord blades transformed thrust efficiency. Pilots noted the dramatic improvement. Climb performance surged even though engine power was unchanged. Water injection unleashed the R-2800's hidden reserve. Later P-47Ds received a water methanol system for short bursts of higher boost. Output rose from about 2,000 to 2,535 horsepower on late D models, and to roughly 2,800 horsepower on the P-47M. Pilots used it sparingly to avoid catastrophic engine stress, but it gave a vital edge in pursuit or escape. Dive recovery flaps, introduced on D-30S, cured most compressibility problems. External drop tanks extended range. Experimental variants, the XP-47J and XP-47M, pushed the envelope. The XP-47J reached about 502 to 507 miles per hour in tests, proving that even a heavyweight radial could rival the world's fastest prop fighters. The P-47M emerged as a dedicated high-speed interceptor. Only 130 were built, all delivered to Hub Zemke's 56th Fighter Group, the Wolfpack. Although sometimes described as a counter to Germany's V-1 flying bombs, the M arrived after the V-1 campaign had largely ended. Its true purpose was to catch jets, and late-war 190s and 109s. By early 1945 it was among the fastest Allied piston fighters, about 470 to 475 miles per hour at altitude, climbing around 3,500 feet per minute. Part 4, Apex, Thunderbolt Supreme, 1945. Early 1945, skies over Germany. In the war's final act, jets entered combat, yet the piston-engined P-47M reached its zenith. Few opponents could escape a well-flown Thunderbolt. Its dive was unmatched. In climbs, the newest Bf-10-9s and FW-19s 0S could still compete only under ideal conditions. Initial mechanical troubles plagued the S, ignition failures, carburetor issues, engine fires, but ground crews and engineers resolved them rapidly. By spring, the 56th Fighter Group hunted Me-262s and R-234s jets across the Reich. March 14th, 1945. Allied fighters downed several R-234s during the Remagen attacks. Some accounts credit 56th Group P-47s with R-234 kills in March, though these attributions remain debated among historians. March 25, 1945, Major George Bostwick and Second Lieutenant Edwin Crosthwaite of the 63rd Fighter Squadron caught 2 Me-262s on landing approach at Pachim and shot them down, an episode well attested in 56th Group records and memoirs. Even in the jet age, Kartveli's propeller-driven fighter could destroy the most advanced aircraft in the world when flown with tactical intelligence. Elsewhere across the continent, thousands of standard P-47s-D served as fighter bombers, pounding rail networks, armour columns and troop concentrations. Its thick armour and air-cooled engine made it nearly indestructible in the ground attack role. Allied soldiers cheered when jugs appeared overhead. German pilots acknowledged the Thunderbolt's fearsome reputation. Veterans later characterised it as a fighter bomber that could take staggering punishment, sentiments often attributed to aces like Josef Priller and Werner Schröer, though direct wartime sources for the exact wording are scarce. May 1945. The European war ended. The P-47 had flown over 740,000 combat sorties, destroying about 3,750 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, and thousands more on the ground. The 56th Fighter Group, flying P-47s exclusively, finished as the highest-scoring fighter group in the 8th Air Force and the top-scoring P-47 unit, with roughly 665 to 675 victories credited depending on the record source. Part 5, Legacy. More than 15,600, approximately 15,686, P-47 Thunderbolts were built, slightly more than the P-51, making it the most produced American fighter of the war. For Alexander Kartveli, a refugee from revolution who rebuilt his life designing aircraft for freedom, the P-47 was vindication. He proved a radial engine heavyweight could match or exceed the best European inline fighters. His principles, turbocharging, rugged structure, concentrated firepower, became cornerstones of post-war American aircraft design. For the pilots who flew it, the P-47 was a trusted companion. It brought Robert S. Johnson home with his aircraft torn apart. It carried Gabi Gabreski to 28 victories. It gave thousands of airmen the confidence to attack knowing their aircraft could absorb punishment and keep flying. The Thunderbolt's descendants, the F-84 Thunderjet and F-105 Thunderchief, carried Kartveli's philosophy into the jet age. But the P-47 remained unique, the aircraft that transformed from an unlikely heavyweight into the hammer of Allied air supremacy. On 2 continents, its distinctive engine roar announced American air power. When the last P-47 landed in 1945, it left behind a legacy not of elegance, but of effectiveness. Proof that engineering vision, properly executed, could turn disadvantage into dominance. Alexander Kartveli's gamble had succeeded beyond measure. This documentary was created using verified historical data, first-hand accounts, and primary sources. Every effort has been made to ensure accuracy through official records, archival materials, and scholarly research. Technical details and quotations are drawn from wartime production records, military intelligence reports, and reputable historical analyses. Some scenes are presented as dramatizations grounded in documented context. This production honors the people, events, and legacies it depicts.